Joining us tonight on Toyota Sports Talk, we've got Lake Lewis Jr., so that must mean we're talking all things Washington Commanders. He is our Commanders, our NFL insider. Always great to have Lake on the program. Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, Lake.
Hey, Nat, how are you?
Doing great. I know there's so much going on right now. We were just talking off camera between the Capitals, opening day we just had. This NFL draft is going to creep up very quickly, and we're already, turning the page to the month of August. So we're going to talk all things draft today and free agency, but specifically with this draft this year with the Commanders, 29th pick, a little less pomp and circumstance than last year when the Commanders had that second overall pick. How do you see the Commanders now attacking this NFL draft?
I think because when you're picking at the 29th pick, it's not like you have a guy like a Jaden Daniels who was there last year at number two. Probably would have been number one if Washington was picking number one. So with that said, you kind of have to go best player on the board, who's still on your board, who's sitting there at 29. And maybe if there's a guy that, literally is the clear-cut favorite as far as players on your board, and that person's maybe sitting there at 25, 26, maybe you move up.
I know you were at the draft combine last month and you were keeping your eye on prospects, potential guys that you could see going at that 29th pick. Before we dive into that, do you see this being a possibility that maybe they give up that 29th pick to move back at all?
Absolutely. If you told me to predict what they were going to do, I'm going to say they're going to move out of that pick. A guy like Travion Henderson, is a running back that I really like out of Ohio State. And I think he'll be there at 29, but I also think he'd be there, between like 29 and 35. So if you can move back and get some more draft capital and still get the player that you would have taken originally at that pick, why not do that?
Is there any other guy you're keeping on your radar as potential picks that Washington could look to attack when the draft rolls around?
There's several guys that I think this team could use because they do have, although they were in the NFC Championship last year, they still need some younger players that they can continue to build with. I think Kenneth Grant is a guy that could be sitting there at 29. He's a tackle from Michigan. I know they brought in a lot of defensive players as far as the defensive line, but they're older vets on 1-year deals. So you could get a guy like Kenneth Grant who's sitting there and get a player that you can pair up with Johnny Newton going forward for years to come. And so there's several guys like that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I have a suspicion that the kid Golden from Texas, the wide receiver, might drop in the draft. And, there's some things, nothing as far as character, but just as far as the fit for him. He's really good, and he's a wide receiver. And, yeah, I know that they went out and got Deebo Samuel and re-signed a lot of their own guys back, but still, you can always upgrade. You can always use more youth as far as on your roster.
In terms of, your grade, maybe a letter grade you would give the Commanders during this first wave of free agency, what would that grade be?
I actually give them a solid A. I think it was a really good offseason for these guys. And I know you can't really count, the trades for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil as part of free agency. But under these circumstances, you have to. You have to factor them into this offseason as far as their acquisition. So I give them an A. I think a guy like Will Harris coming in at safety is going to be a huge, huge pickup. Trust me when I tell you, Natalie, this guy I think has Pro Bowl potential. Will Harris is a true free safety who also can give you some nickel coverage at corner as well. So I like that acquisition.
Yeah, I think he's a name a lot of guys are excited about specifically. But what was fun when all of these players were being introduced, to members of the media asking them questions within these last few weeks, it was fun hearing how excited all of these players were to be in Washington because you know very well, covering this team for as long as you have, that's not always been the case.
You want guys that want to be here, not just for a paycheck. And now, these guys want to be a part of this because when you have a young talent like Jaden Daniels to lead you and you have the Terry McLaurins and Bobby Wagners of the world, they know they're going to come into a really strong, culture as far as the locker room vibe. But more importantly, this is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And why not come to a team that's ascending and that's galvanized their fan base again?
So in terms of that way too early evaluation of this roster, how competitive do you see Washington being this season?
Well, I just did a power ranking, a top 10 power ranking last week, and I had Washington at number 5. And it was my pre-draft power ranking. So obviously, whatever happens in the draft could alter some things. But I had Washington at 5, and surprisingly, your hometown team, Detroit, who I still think is going to be really good, I had them at 6. And some people were like, well, Detroit should be at 5. And I'm like, well, Washington beat them. I know Detroit had injuries, but
I'm not going to fight you on that one.
yeah, but had injuries, but I put Washington at 5 just because I think the difference is Washington has something they don't. They have a legit franchise quarterback. If you look at the teams that are, 1 through 4 on my power ranking, there's no surprise. It's the, Kansas City Chiefs, it's, Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and now the Philadelphia Eagles are number 1. They all have franchise quarterbacks. That's what you need to have. And I think Washington has that. So that's why I have them at number 5 right now.
It's crazy to believe almost a full year has passed since we saw Jaden Daniels walk across the stage, since you and I were both there
Mm-hmm.
at Campus Martius Park in Detroit. When this time starts to creep up as we get closer to April, is it crazy to think about just how much has happened within this last year?
Absolutely. And, Natalie, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking about that. Someone mentioned to me, I saw you interviewing Jaden in Detroit at the draft. And I'm like, yeah, I remember us being out there in the park with all the fans out there. And just to think of how far overnight, literally in a year's time, this franchise has gone from being rock bottom, literally being a laughing stock around the league to, as I mentioned to you, a couple of weeks ago when I was in Indianapolis for the combine, people were coming up to me saying, congratulations, like if I had won something. And it's just because I'm covering a winning football team for once. So, yeah, a year can change a lot, and it did for Washington. And now there's no turning back, and there's expectations now. It's get to the Super Bowl, or might be some people that are disappointed this year.
Well, when we did see Jaden walk across the stage, that feeling is still very much alive today. Blake Lewis Jr., thank you so much for joining us.
All right, good seeing you, my friend.
Good seeing you. We'll talk more soon, very soon, I have a feeling. For now, stay with us. We've got so much more Toyota Sports Talk coming up.